Hello everyone, my name is Fretzby Godines and Wonderboy in Cebu, and I am a second-year college student Bachelor of Customs Administration. So may I present to you my presentation. That is all about the operational provisions in CMO, or Customs Memorandum Order Number 22010.
So let's start in section 13, statutory provisions on entrance and clearance. The provision of section 1001 to 1025 of the Tariff and Customs Code of the Philippines, as amended, on entrance and clearance of vessels are deemed imported in the manual.
Next is section 14, pre-arrival. A notice of arrival, or NOA, with estimated time of arrival, or ETA. First is the shipping agent or representative of any vessel engaged in the foreign trade entering of any Philippine ports of entry shall notify the Piers and Inspection Division, Bay Service Section, or its equivalent office of the vessel's arrival and all other particulars at least 24 hours in advance. Next is letter B. Upon receipt of the notice of arrival, or NOA, the Customs Inspector or A2MOIC of the Piers and Inspection Division, Bay Service Section, or its equivalent office shall perform the following functions. First is electronically verify the vessel's registry number, principal, and other vessels information through Client Profile Registration System, or CPRS. Next is number 2. Input the estimated time of arrival ETA in the E2M custom system. And number 3 is encode the time and date in the system and affix his signature on the hard copy of the notice of arrival. Fourth is furnish the customs boarding team a copy of the processed notice of arrival, or NOA. Next is letter B. Assignment of customs boarding team. The customs boarding team shall be assigned by the Chief, B Service Section, or equivalent office through a duly signed assignment order, and all documents except copies for the customs inspector on board the vessel shall be forwarded to the office of the Chief, B Service Section, or its equivalent office for transmittal to office concerned. Next is fourth, Inward Foreign Manifest, or IFM, and Consolidate Cargo Manifest, or CCM contents. The hard copy of the Inward Foreign Manifest required to be submitted by the master of the vessel to the boarding officer shall contain the following information. First is bill of lading number. Second is marks and numbers of cartoons, drums, boxes, crates, and other forms of protective packaging for breakbulk. Container and seal number of containerized and initials FCL if full container load, and LCL if less container load. Next is number of package, kind of packages, cartoons, boxes, crates, drums, etc. And next is contents of description of cargo, shipper, consignee, gross weight in metric tons, measurement in cubic meters, port of origin, and last is notify party. Inward foreign cargo manifest submitted not in accordance with the above requirements shall be rejected. The customs senior boarding officer shall, with his initials, note down on all the copies of inward foreign cargo manifest delivered to him by the master of vessel the specific time and date when such documents was received. If the inward foreign cargo manifest is not the English language, the customs senior boarding officer shall require it translate to English before accepting the same. First is late submission. First offense is 10,000 pesos. Second offense is 20,000 pesos. Third offense is 30,000 pesos. Second is not a compliant submission is 30,000 pesos. Next is Section 15 is arrival. Documents or permits. First is quarantine certificate for incoming vessels from a foreign port. Entry of vessels of any port or place outside of the Philippines shall not be permitted until they have obtained a quarantine certificate issued under the authority of Bureau of Quarantine. However, if a vessel has already been used in quarantine certificate in the first Philippine port of entry, will not be required to undergo another quarantine formalities at succeeding ports of call in the Philippines. No person shall be allowed to board or leave the vessel before they are all cleared by the Bureau of Quarantine, except the pilot who is governed by the quarantine regulations. In such contingencies, the certificate shall be part of the required documents to be received by the customs senior boarding officer from the master of the vessel. No quarantine permit shall be required for the discharge or regularly manifest cargo, including animals, plants, and etc., unless otherwise required by the law regulations. However, if animals or plants are carried as baggage, their discharge shall be subject to the regulation promulgated by the Bureau of or office concerned. Second is entrance of vessel from a foreign port. Upon arrival of a vessel from a foreign port, BOC OPM from Number 9 oath of entering vessel from a foreign port with the customs documentary stamp, duly accomplished by the master in 4. The following customs personnel shall be the members of the customs boarding team. First is customs senior boarding officer, second is customs inspector, and third is customs guard. Next is letter C, submission of advanced electronic manifest before arrival of vessels engaged in foreign trade through E2M customs system and penalties. The submission of electronic copy of Inward Foreign Manifest or EIFM and electronic copy of Consolidated Cargo Manifest or ECCM must be done through any of the value-added service providers or VAPs accredited by the BOC. The IFEM in the case shipping lines must be electronically submitted at least 12 hours before arrival of the carrying vessel. The ECCM in case of non-vessel operating common carrier, invoke, cargo consolidator, co-loader, breakbulk agent must be submitted at least 6 hours before arrival of the carrying vessel. The cut-off time for the manifest, EIFM and ECCM submission is calculated from the submitted estimated date and time for arrival using the BOC Getaway Service Clock. The IFM must be submitted ahead of the CCM. If the CCM is submitted ahead of the EIFM, the ECCM will not be registered in the E2M custom system, but has to be resubmitted when the EIFM is already registered. The next one is registration of e-manifest. The system automatically registered a manifest in E2M custom system if the manifest meets the submission deadline. However, if the deadline is missed, the concerned shipping line agent should submit a formal request letter of the Office of Deputy Collector for operations to allow the BOC and FATED manually to register of the manifest in E2M. Only the Deputy Collector for the operation can approve the request of execute the manual registration through the direct register function in E2M. A late or non-compliant submission fee will be charged for this procedure following the schedule of the fines provided in Section 2521 of the Tariff and Customs Code of the Philippines as amended. Copies shall be presented to the Office of Customs Clearance offered within 24 hours. Third is documents to be produced by the master
upon entry of vessel. The following documents properly accomplished shall be submitted by the Master of the Customs Senior Boarding Officer. First is quarantine of certificate fatigue. Second is clearance of vessel from last port of call. Next is original and 4 copies of inward foreign manifest duly signed by the master. Next is 3 copies each of the following. First is crew list, second is passenger list, third is passenger list or lines as required by immigration law in force of the Philippines. Fourth is a copy of original duplicate of bills of lading. Fifth is banned stores list. Six is narcotics and dangerous drugs list. Next is ship store list, mail list, firearms and ammunition list, crew and declaration list, parcel list. Last one is shipping articles and register of the vessel of Philippine Registry. Letter E. Through cargo manifest, if any, which shall be disputed to the custom inspectors and shall be returned to the master prior to the departure of other ports. Next is cargo storage land or hatch list. Next is if passenger vessel, 3 copies of disembarking passenger list and their baggage declaration. The customs senior boarding officer shall, after carefully comparing the copies with the original manifest stamp, each of such manifest on the last page thereof with a rubber stamp provided for the purpose, verify that the necessary information required in accordance with all articles, where goods, merchandise, and any other cargo including unaccomplished baggage and orders or in cargo from abroad received by the master, officer, and crew of vessels without bills of lading or not covered by manifest or parcel list shall be subject to seizure as unmanifested cargo under the customs law. Next is distribution of inward foreign manifest IFM hard copies. The inward foreign manifest shall be distributed for the following offices. A is original copy, Peers and Inspection Division or PID or equivalent office. Next is 1 copy, Commission on Audit or COA resident auditor through the Office of the Commissioner or OCCOM. Next is 1 copy, Intelligence Group of IG. Next is 1 copy, Assessment and Operation Monitoring Group or AOCG. Fifth is permit for discharge and lading of cargo. Unless the vessel has put into distress, the customs senior boarding officer shall, upon placing the vessel under customs surveillance and control, issue a general permit. Such permit, however, shall not constitute an authority for the loading and export cargo or delivery of import cargo at shipside without the required entries or permits as the case may be. The general permit shall be endorsed by the customs inspector, signed on the board of the vessel mentioned in the permit at the back thereof, showing whether all import cargoes has been discharged at the port or not. Such permit shall be included in his report after the termination of his assessment on board a vessel. 6 is endorsed of permits. The following permits shall be endorsed in the reverse side thereof. First is general permit. Second is shipside permit. Third is permits for the sending of special consignments of cargo to the piers or to the parcel section. And last, permit issued by the deputy collector for operations or its equivalent office for the transfer of cargo from one vessel to another. On the same permit and directly under this preceding endorsement, the receiving customs inspector shall make an endorsement to the effect that he received the cargoes on board the vessel to which he is assigned, All endorsement and returns shall be signed over the printed name and executed clearly and legibly, especially with the reference of any figures that may be included. All minor correction shall be initialed by the endorsing officer. All other permits shall be endorsed on the reverse side thereof. 7. Shipside permit. Shipside permit, when duly processed and approved by the Collector of Customs or the Deputy Collector for Operations or its equivalent office, and the case may be, is an authority for the customs inspector assigned on a vessel to allow the discharge of cargoes specified on the permit at shipside unto lighters underguarded. 3 kinds of shipside permit. First, regular shipside permit is issued by the Deputy Collector for the operations or its equivalent office as now presently required for all cargoes which belong to the categories of regular shipside cargoes under existing regulation. Second, special shipside permit, when cargoes do not belong to the regular shipside cargoes such as the ballast, garbage, provisions, watering, bunkering, vessel parts for repair, for the ship's agent has to get the authority for the Collector of Customs prior to the process and approval by the Deputy Collector for Operations for its equivalent office. Next is temporary shipside permit, is a written authority to discharge cargoes shipside unto lighter as per order of the Collector of Customs. Permit shall be forwarded direct to the customs inspector of the carrying vessel without entry to be being filled. This is issued only as an emergency measure so as not delay ship operations. This permit is also issued on Saturdays, Sundays and holidays when there are no offices to process the regular shipside permit. Several conditions are usually imposed on the issuance of this temporary permit, among which are that the cargo is underguarded continuously until released by the Bureau of Customs. Next is that the lighter shall not be taken out of the customs designated barge pool area until the regular shipside permit is issued by the Deputy Collector for Operations or its equivalent office and is presented to the customs inspector for the carrying vessel. And lastly, that the Deputy Collector for Operation Shift, Piers and Inspection Divisions or PID or its equivalent office be duly notified of this discharge under the temporary permit. Pending issuance of shipside permit. Pending issuance of shipside permit, the level permit, customs inspector on board may be received written request from the consignees countersigned on by the ship's agents and approved by the Collector of Customs that certain designated goods be discharged into separate carriers. Under such circumstances, the same procedure is enjoined as in case of shipside delivery except the consignment shall be hauled alongside the vessel underguarded, provided that in case number permit is received by the customs inspector on board within 72 hours from the time of discharge, the chief and base service section or its equivalent office shall be advised accordingly so that the cargo may be sent to the customs designated barge, pool, area, piers, wharf, underguarded. The customs inspector assigned on the vessel who allows the discharge of cargoes at shipside shall comply strictly with the conditions and or requirements stated on the permit and prior to the unloading of.
And this is the part of temporary shipside permits and transfer note. Vote note. This is the part of boarding sequence. And this is the customs boarding team on foreign vessel. And last, this is the actual time of arrival at a foreign vessel through to an customs system. Next is the submission of supplemental cargo manifest. Submission of supplemental manifest. Next one is unloading of cargoes. First is containerized. Two, bulk and break bulk. Point 1 is unloading off and break bulk cargoes at shipside. This is under of the unloading of bulk and break bulk cargoes at shipside. Duties of customs inspectors relative to import cargo. The next one is will import cargoes discharge at shipside. Next is letter D. And the last one is letter E. Next is letter F. Next is letter G. Next is letter H. Next one is letter I. And the next is letter J. First is letter K. Next is letter L. And the last one is letter M. Instructions to Customs Inspector relative to carriers receiving import cargo. First is letter A. Second is letter B. Third is letter C. Next is letter D. Next is letter E. Next is letter F. Next is letter G. And the last one is letter H. To point to unloading of cargo dockside. Import cargoes. Passengers' baggage, parcel list and cruise personal effect. First is letter A. Next is letter B. Next is letter C. And the last one is letter D. Section 16. Departure. A. Documents or permits. 1. Documents required for exportation. 1.1 in general. A. Export declaration. B. Commercial invoice. C. Packing list. D. Export permit for regulated cargoes. 1.2. Additional documents required. A. Shipments. PESA shipmensch. Provincial loading. Constructive warehousing and immediate exportation. Special permit to load. 2. Inspector's certificate of lading or report a customs inspector on board. Three. Customs clearance of foreign vessel. A. BOC Elbe Form number 12B, BOC Elbe Form number 10C, BOC Elbe Form number 11, D. BOC Elbe Form number 2E, BOC Elbe Form number 3F, B. C Form number 88, G. Bureau of Quarantine Clearance for outgoing vessels, Plant Quarantine Clearance A, Post Office Clearance, J. Request for customs clearance by shipping agency signed by the customs inspector concurring that the vessel in which he is assigned is ready to sail for foreign port. Next is letter K. Next is letter I. B. Stuffing and loading of cargoes. 1. Containerized. 1.1 Instructions relative to stuffing off containerized export cargoes. First is letter A. Next is letter B. Next one is letter C. Next is letter D. Next is letter E. Next is letter F. 1. The stuffing inspector shall supervise the actual stuffing at the place where it shall be conducted. 2. He shall see to it that only those expired cargoes with duly processed export declarations permits with the authority to load shall be allowed to be stuffed into the container van. 3. He shall ascertain that the accompanying supporting documents or attachments to export declarations, permits are complete and correspond to what has been declared therein. 4. He shall make sure that any discrepancy in the export declarations or permits as against the export cargoes to be stuffed is rectified accordingly. 5. Upon completion of the stuffing, he shall ascertain that the doors of the container van are closed, locked and properly sealed. 6. In case of stuffing at sites outside customs zone, he shall issue a transfer note with cargo details. 7. Upon the departure of the vessel to which the container van was loaded, he shall accomplish the inspector's certificate of lading ICL. 8. As to warehousing export shipment, he shall certify and sign the certificate of inspection and loading call, and shall perform such other duties that may be assigned to him from time to time by his superiors. G. Inspector's certificate of lading or report of the stuffing inspector. H. Duty requirements and overtime work conditions. One point 2. Stuffing of containers in customs bonded warehouses. One point 3. Loading of bulk and break bulk export cargoes at shipside. First is letter A. Second is letter B. Third is letter C. And the fourth one is letter D. One point 4. Instructions relative to loading of containerized export cargoes. First is letter A. Second is letter B. The loading inspector shall allow the loading only upon presentation of an authority to load by the folio. First is Export Division, or ASAC for regular exports, special permits to load SDL local transshipment, export shipments, and PESA shipments. Next is Export Coordination Division for export declarations processed by for provincial loading. Office of the Deputy Collector for operations for constructive warehousing and immediate exportation and foreign transshipment permits. And for SBL empty containers. Next is letter C. Next is letter D. E. Inspector's certificate of lading or report of loading inspector. F. Duty requirements and overtime working conditions. Two, bulk and break bulk. 2.1. Loading of export cargoes at dockside. 2.2. Loading of bulk and break bulk export cargo. First is letter A. Next is letter B. One, name of thieves still touch the cargoiskins. To name and license a number of the carrier. 3, number of bags, bales, cartons, etc. it contains. 4, name of the exporter. And 5, number of the export declaration. Next is letter C. Next is letter D. And the last one is letter E. Two point 3. Loading of passengers' baggage or crew personal effects. Section 17. Customs Transit. There are 4 kinds of customs transit operation. A. From port of entry to another port of entry as exit point for outright exportation. I. Local, Palm to Subic. B. From port of entry to another port of entry or land customs office. I. Palm to Peza or outside Sykes off dock. C. From an inland customs office to port of entry as exit point for outright exportation. I. E. Peza to Palm. And D. From one port of entry or land customs office to another port of entry or land customs office. I. E. To Peza and Peza to Peza. Section 18. Transshipment. A. Special instructions to customs inspectors relative to the discharge of transshipped cargo. B. Instructions relative to foreign transshipment by And the last one is Section 19. Transfer of imported cargo to outside Sykes by